Can you explain how a City Hall accountant ends up bound in a professional knot in the desert? The Tucson police call the case of Virginia Daly a mystery. The data calls it a systemic failure. Audit with me, the trail of an elite divorce, and the protocol error that allowed an invisible predator to vanish for 40 years. Numbers do not lie. The system does. These are the facts.
On August 11, 1980, two men located Virginia Daly's remains off an isolated roadside at the intersection of North Camino Verde and West Ina Road, near the slopes of the Tucson Mountains in Arizona. Virginia was found nude and strangled, with her hands and feet bound. Her clothing and personal belongings from her purse were scattered across a 10-foot area surrounding the body.
Looking at how she was left, there are only two ways to read this: the strangulation, the nudity. That's personal. It screams anger. It screams hatred from someone in her inner circle. But then, there's the location. Dumping a body in a spot this remote, yet this easy to reach. That's not a crime of passion. It's a message. Cold and calculated. The remains belonged to Virginia Daly. Friends called her Ginger. She was 32, an accountant working out of Tucson City Hall.
A graduate of Amphitheater High School and the University of Arizona, her background was built on culinary arts, crafts, literature, and music.
Her coworkers said she was conscientious, friendly, but cautious. That caution, it wasn't just a quirk. It was for a reason.
Records indicate that before she died, Virginia filed a formal grievance against one of her managers. Investigators noted that the Pima County Sheriff's Office later handed those documents over to her family.
Her past included two marriages that didn't last. The first to John David Helmkamp between 1971 and 1974. The second to Paul R. Kugler from 1975 to 1977.
For the next 2 years, Virginia stayed single, living in a condo in Midtown Tucson.
But the paper trail suggests something else. A shadow in her inner circle. Reportedly, an ex-boyfriend was still in the picture during those final months.
On the night of the crime, Virginia was last seen at 8 p.m. The following day, August 12th, after her remains were located, investigators searched her home. Her car was sitting in the garage. No blood. No signs of a struggle.
This points to two tactical possibilities. She was grabbed either as she left or right as she arrived home. Since her address remains suppressed in the records, we can only pin her location within a specific radius, between Alvernon Way, Campbell Avenue, Broadway Boulevard, and Grant Road.
The likely disposal route was Grant, Oracle, and Ina Road. This 15-mile trip took about 30 minutes to navigate in 1980. Back then, this area was a dead zone. Low traffic. Total isolation. It offered the perfect window to dump evidence and head back to the city to lock in an alibi.
Look at the timeline. If she's taken at 8:30 p.m., her body is in the dirt before 10 o'clock. But there's a detail that changes everything. August 11th was a new moon. Total, suffocating darkness. Operating in the Tucson Mountains without high-powered flashlights or headlights, which would draw eyes for miles, is nearly impossible. This wasn't luck. The killer knew the ground. He moved by memory.
To plan an attack like this, the offender needed to monitor police patrols and private security checks. In 1980, those security measures were failing due to recession-related budget cuts.
This was a hit. Planned. Cold. But how do you watch a house for hours without getting noticed? A strange car parked on the street stands out. He could have rented a house nearby. But there's a more technical play. In Tucson, everyone used car covers to fight the heat. A covered vehicle, sitting for hours, is invisible. It just looks like part of the scenery.
Tucson also used low-pressure sodium streetlights to protect the local observatories. These lights strip away color and make it hard to see fine details.
Under that yellow glow, shadows are deep. A man standing behind a tree, just waiting, would be a ghost. But why did Virginia have to die? To find the answer, you have to follow the money. In our audit, Two theories stand out. Let's look at the first. Systemic corruption.
Between the 1970s and 1980s, Tucson underwent reforms that increased the opacity of public funds. On June 3, 1980, just 2 months before the crime, Arizona voters approved Article 9. This constitutional amendment strictly limited spending for cities and counties based on a formula tied to inflation and population growth.
This turned every city accountant into a target. If the numbers didn't match, if there was even a hint of subreporting or padding the budget, the city faced a brutal penalty. Tucson stood to lose 1/3 of its shared income tax revenue. We are talking about $11.5 million in 1980 money. Adjusted for inflation today, that's nearly $48 million. Over 5% of the city's entire annual budget, gone.
As a public auditor, Virginia's job was to ensure the books were clean. Any irregularity would have triggered severe state scrutiny of the local administration.
While there is no evidence linking Joel Valdez or James K. Jr. personally to the crime, the administrative liability was absolute. In a system of total control, shifts of this magnitude don't just happen, they are allowed. Records indicate that in 1980, public employees filed complaints regarding Valdez's management. They claimed the new spending base was being used to favor political allies and hide discriminatory hiring.
Virginia had already filed a grievance against her own manager. At the same time, Joseph Bonanno, patriarch of the Bonanno crime family, was active in Tucson in gambling, extortion, and narcotics.
The mob was already inside. They were using legitimate construction firms to wash dirty cash, and Bonanno wasn't the only player. Charles Keating, later convicted in a multi-billion-dollar fraud scheme, was heavily active in the area. Article 9 didn't stop the money from flowing. It just forced the players to use more violent means to keep the tap open.
The federal operation known as Lively Green later proved that corruption in Tucson reached the police and even the military. Dozens pleaded guilty to bribery and extortion.
Insiders from the finance department reported through informal channels that the audit was a ticking time bomb. They claimed officials were covering up structural deficits and siphoning funds into vanity projects like the community center, while essential services were gutted. If Virginia was about to blow the whistle on a systemic scam, she was no longer an employee. She was a liability that needed to be erased.
August is the month Arizona municipalities closed their fiscal reports. The 1980 report was the most critical of the decade. It would set the expenditure base for the new limit laws.
Virginia vanished right in the middle of that window. The timing isn't just suspicious, it's a signature. But one question remains. If this was a professional hit to protect a paper trail, why leave the body where it could be found? Wouldn't making her disappear have been more efficient? Now, let's dissect the second possibility. We call it the Tactical X.
In 1992, Detective Gary Demers revisited the 1980 case files. The investigation centered on Virginia's former boyfriend. Records indicate he skipped town immediately after the murder, citing planned travel or business commitments.
He wasn't just some guy with a grudge. He was a pro. He had background training in private security. He knew access protocols, blind spots, and how to move through a building without leaving a trace. According to her family, Virginia mentioned his insider knowledge. It raises a dead serious question. Did Virginia use his credentials to get her hands on information she wasn't supposed to see?
In 1980, Tucson's private security industry was a direct limb of the construction sector. If a corruption audit went public, the construction giants were the first to bleed.
His alibi. He claimed he was at a concert from dusk until dawn. The PCSO couldn't break it in 1980, but look at the actual logs of that night.
The only musical event near that date was a talent show at the University of Arizona. 14 local student bands. A college crowd.
Think about it. A man in his late 30s, or early 40s, sitting through an 8-hour student battle of the bands. He would have stood out like a red target in a white field. Nobody remembers him being there. The alibi is paper thin,
Detective Demers found records showing the suspect was obsessed with bypass protocols. He reportedly demonstrated to Virginia several times how he could kill alarms and pick locks using his security ID.
Demers used psychological profiling to bridge the gaps. The motive, control, humiliation. He pointed to an offender with specific training in prisoner containment or interrogation that explains the state of the body. Nude, bound. This wasn't a sex crime. It was a tactical extraction. He used shame and terror to interrogate Virginia before she died.
Decades later, DNA testing returned only female profiles. No male hair, no skin under the nails, no sweat.
That's not luck. That's forensic countermeasures. This crime was planned down to the bone. The tactical X had the skill, the motive, and a fake alibi. But without a smoking gun, the theory remains stuck in the cold case files. Why did Virginia's case hit a brick wall? Why is there no justice? It comes down to 5 fatal errors. 5 moments where the system failed the auditor.
Error 1. Failure of evidence protocol. Items were collected without proper chain of custody, resulting in the contamination of potential touch DNA.
They handled the evidence like amateur hour. By the time modern forensics caught up, the biological trail was already dead, contaminated, stone cold.
Error 2. Tunnel vision. Investigators focused exclusively on the ex-boyfriend, failing to launch a parallel investigation into Virginia's professional life or the files she was auditing.
They looked at the heart, but they ignored the spreadsheets. In a city bleeding millions, you don't just look for a jealous lover. You look for the man holding the pen.
Error 3. Failure to challenge the alibi. The suspect's claim of attending a concert was accepted without a rigorous forensic timeline or witness verification.
They took his word for it. No one checked the venue. No one verified the crowd. A 40-year-old man at a college talent show. And the police just let it slide? That's not an investigation. That's a free pass.
Error 4. Institutional pressure. Virginia's formal grievance against her manager was reportedly ignored. Records show no search warrants were executed at Tucson City Hall to recover sensitive documents she had accessed.
This is where it gets grave. Systemic opacity, administrative negligence. There is zero evidence that the PCSO even knocked on the door of the finance department. Was it laziness? Or were the orders coming from the top floor to keep the lid on Tucson Hall? The audit suggests the latter.
Error 5. Reliance on eyewitnesses over forensics. The 1980 investigation prioritized unreliable witness statements instead of searching suspects' vehicles for microscopic hair and fiber evidence.
They went for the he said, she said, and ignored the fiber. In 1980, a single hair in a trunk could have ended this. Instead, they chased ghosts while the real evidence rotted in the sun. 5 errors, 1 dead zone, no conviction. My audit ends here. But the data is still screaming. The inconsistencies are right there, etched into the cold record. Virginia didn't just disappear into the desert. She was erased by a system that couldn't afford her honesty. The numbers don't lie. People do. Drop a like on the video. Leave your questions in the comments below. Tell me, which part of the official narrative do you trust the least? Join the JDAL team and stay on the ground for the next investigation.